And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here each week talking to interesting people and talking about topical issues. And this week we rejoin with a favorite guest of ours who always has something nice to say.
Well, very interesting as well. Yes, the Honorable Drew Edmondson, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, is going to be joining us again. We've got to get an update from Drew about what's going on in his office, because I happen to know there's a lot going on in his office and they stay very busy. By the way, before we get to Drew, we want to welcome, 1 week belatedly, but welcome the Oklahoma Metropolitan Association of Realtors as a new sponsor of The Verdict. We're glad to have the Oklahoma City Metropolitan Association on board with us, and Don Kennedy, the CEO. You'll be seeing their commercials, and we appreciate their support and their efforts in bringing the show to you viewers.
Absolutely. We'll be back with the Attorney General, Drew Edmondson, next on The Verdict.
In driving rain, blistering heat, and bitter cold, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, Chesapeake drills non-stop for natural gas on American soil. Chesapeake drills more new gas wells than anyone else, and from those wells collects the most drilling information and acquires more 3D seismic images, leveraging every efficiency to improve the odds of finding more natural gas every day with every well we drill. The better job we do of discovering bigger reserves of clean-burning American natural gas, the greater the prosperity of our nearby communities, our state, and our nation. And as long as there are more gas reserves to be found here in the U.S., we will never rest. Chesapeake. Natural gas wins the day.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
We are glad to welcome back the Honorable Drew Edmondson, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, to another appearance on The Verdict. Drew is, of course, a native Oklahoman, did his undergraduate work at Northeastern State University, his law work at the University of Tulsa. He served in the House of Representatives, actually before he went to law school. He is both a veteran of the Navy and Vietnam. He has been elected 4 times statewide as Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, and we are very pleased you give us some time to come back, because I know how busy you and your office are kept.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think this may be my 8th appearance on The Verdict, but I don't have 8 cups. I just want you to know that.
Well, we'll have to get you caught up.
We're not hoarding them in the
No, we do allow our guests to keep their coffee cup here, is what Drew's referring to, the great honorarium that you get for being a guest on The Verdict. And 8th time. You obviously have done well in the previous 7. We only invite you back if you've done a good job before. So tell us what you've been doing to keep busy since the 7th visit to The Verdict.
Well, probably the big thing that's on our radar screen right now is the poultry litigation that's going on in eastern Oklahoma, trying to protect the waters from surface runoff of poultry waste. We're set for trial on the merits next year, late spring or early summer, but we just completed a hearing on a temporary injunction based on what we said was an imminent risk to human health. and that is from the bacteria that's also contained within that poultry waste.
Now, if you were to get that injunction, what would the immediate effect be?
Well, the immediate effect would be that they could no longer surface supply poultry waste ostensibly as fertilizer within the Illinois River watershed, that too much of it's running off and that it endangers the public because of the bacteria, which includes things like E. coli and salmonella. That does not mean it could not be surface applied outside the Illinois River watershed, or if the waste were treated to destroy the bacteria, it could then be surface applied. And then we get to the trial on the environmental impact of that application next year.
Now, how long did that preliminary injunction hearing take?
It seemed like it took forever. It actually was 4 weeks long to get 2 weeks worth of testimony in. We went 1 week, and it was a short week because of President's Day, and then the judge had a conference which he left for a week, and then when he came back he got the flu. So it was another period of time before we could start up again, but 2 full weeks of testimony.
I followed it kind of through the newspaper and television reports from a distance, like most of our viewers probably did. And one thing that impressed me that you don't see, or I don't remember seeing very often, was a sitting Attorney General taking part as an active advocate in court for the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. You were one of, if not the lead trial lawyer for the state in that hearing, were you not?
Well, I did the opening and closing and have several witnesses assigned to me for either direct examination or cross. There was a lot of work done by a lot of lawyers in that case, and they all participated. But I was directly involved, and it's an indication of the importance I place on this litigation, how important it is not just to the people who swim and fish in the Illinois River, but also to all of the citizens of Oklahoma.
Now, simply put, the case implies that there have been poultry waste somehow gotten into watershed that comes into the state of Oklahoma, largely from the state of Arkansas, or does the suit involve anyone who lives in the state of Oklahoma?
Well, there are 1 million acres in the Illinois River watershed, and it's roughly 50-50, half of it in Arkansas and half of it in Oklahoma. But there are more poultry houses on the Arkansas side, 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio. So most of the waste that's being surface applied is being applied in Arkansas, although we're also doing it here in Oklahoma. The waste is rich in nitrogen, rich in phosphorus. It's a great fertilizer. The problem is if the plants can't take it up, then it runs off. And then it gets into the water and fertilizes the water. And that creates what the scientists at Oklahoma State University call eutrophication, which is excess algae bloom sucks the oxygen out of the water, changes the biota, changes the animal makeup of the watershed, and ultimately will choke a river or a lake to death.
And can make people sick?
Contained also within that are bacteria, which we alleged and our scientists said can make people sick. You know, the amount that's going down, probably 1 in 1,000 would get sick, or 1 in 100, depending on the levels. But 150,000 people a year swim in that watershed. And so if you multiply it out, it's 900 to 1,000 people a year that are getting gastroenteritis and other sicknesses based upon bodily contact with that water.
Now, the poultry companies know, or the defendants know, that there's a chance that there will be an injunction issued against them to quit doing that. I suppose, did they disclose what their contingency plans would be, that in the event an injunction is issued, what are they going to do with the waste?
They have not disclosed that. There was a prior lawsuit that the city of Tulsa brought over the watersheds of Uchi and Spavinaw. And as that reached a conclusion, there was a moratorium on surface application in Uchi Spavinaw that lasted 18 months, and nobody went out of business. So it can be done. If the injunction is entered soon, the water will be much safer by summer and will be completely restored within 12 months. So we can do a lot of good in a short period of time.
Is there precedent in other states of similar actions, and do you have some idea of how this might apply to this case?
There have not been precedents in other states. There are a few isolated instances, but usually they involve large-scale operations with point source discharge. A lagoon overflows and gets into the water, something like that. This is not point source discharge. This is non-point source, which means it's runoff from land. And there's not a lot of precedent for that across the country. We think that there's a very good likelihood that if we prevail here in Oklahoma, it may change the way poultry production is conducted in Georgia and Alabama and South Carolina, North Carolina, and other states where they also engage just in, they've got a waste product and they just dispose of it by surface applying it on the land. And I don't think we're going to be doing that very much longer.
Well, are the state laws involved, federal laws involved, both?
We have alleged both violations of both state and federal laws, federal clean water laws and also Oklahoma agricultural laws dealing with surface disposal. Our laws set limits, but it also provides that in no event shall surface application result in runoff to the streams. So there's a violation of state law and there's also violations of federal law, we allege.
Yeah.
Drew Edmondson is the Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma. We'll have more with Drew on the verdict right after this.
Okiwani is an Indian name for a place where children play. When we obtained the camp, we found a lot of oil debris left in the woods. We saw a commercial about how the oil and natural gas industry cleans up old oil well sites. We called the OERB and they agreed to remove tons of concrete and steel. It didn't cost us a thing. Thousands of children have left their footprints on this land. Thanks to the oil and gas industry, they will for a long time to come.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Camp Myers. We're visiting with the state's Attorney General, Drew Edmondson. And Drew, I know you got a lot of other things going on besides the poultry litigation. Why don't you go down some of those issues?
Well, it's always busy. We're still worrying over tobacco issues, for example. The annual payment is due this month from the tobacco industry.
Now give us a little bit of background and catch people up on that, if they're only vaguely aware of what you're talking about.
Well, we filed a lawsuit against the tobacco industry in 1996. We reached a settlement with them, a global settlement, in November of 1998 that affected 46 states in the union.
Well, you were one of the 8 people selected to be on the settlement committee, were you not?
I was one of 8 attorneys general who spent the better part of half a year in New York City negotiating the master settlement agreement in the very plush offices of the opposition. But it was a very interesting experience. I'm glad we got it done. It creates a revenue stream to the state of Oklahoma based on the number of cigarettes that are sold nationally. That revenue stream was estimated to exceed $2 billion over the first 25 years, and it's well on its way to meeting that. I think we've received I know we've received over $500 million already just since the settlement kicked in. We still are having issues with the tobacco industry. There's a provision in the MSA that payments will
Master Settlement
Agreement, that the payments from the companies will go down if cigarette sales go down. That's a good thing, but it also says they'll go down if the participating manufacturers who signed onto the agreement lose market share to new companies that are starting up. And they've lost a lot of market share, and some of them to Indian tribes that have started cigarette companies. So we're in negotiation now over how much, whether or not the Master Settlement Agreement is responsible for this loss, and how much they're going to withhold from their payments. But we should receive approximately $90 million this April as the annual payment from the tobacco companies.
Has our
Go ahead.
experience been that the state legislature has attributed this $90 million in addition to what they were already funding, or have they taken away what they were funding previously and let this supplant it?
Well, the voters in their wisdom passed in 2000 a tobacco settlement trust. So today, 75% of that annual check goes immediately into a constitutionally protected trust that cannot be touched by the legislature. Only the interest can be spent, and it must be spent on public health. The remaining 25% is subject to legislative appropriation. It's placed in a tobacco settlement revolving fund. It's part of the general fund. To date, the legislature has always spent that money also on public health, to their credit. But it's available to be spent on whatever pressing need they have.
That's terrific.
I know you're also working, your office is working on end-of-life issues. Tell our viewers what you're doing in that regard.
We've been very involved in that since the time I was president of the National Association of Attorneys General and adopted end-of-life care as a presidential initiative. That was in 2002, 2003. After that year, we started an Attorney General's task force on end-of-life issues here in Oklahoma, looking at laws, looking at Attorney General opinions, finding out basically the answers to 3 questions that people have at the end of life. People want to know whether their wishes will be known and honored, whether they will receive adequate pain management, and whether they will receive competent care. And we're trying to find out the answers to those questions and if there are any barriers to those questions. Even now, we've adopted a new form for stating a living will, stating what your desires are, and the task force is in the process of trying to get that form disseminated to healthcare providers.
How's that going? Do you think you're making some progress?
It's going very well. You know, I don't know how you measure progress. You know, I had one assistant attorney general who spoke to our conferences who said, if at the end of your term you can say that the level of human suffering in your state has gone down because of your work, then you can credit it as success. And that's what we're shooting for. We're not telling anybody what they should do at the end of life. That's a personal decision. What we're trying to make sure of, though, is whatever they decide can be implemented.
Is there a case on gas price gouging?
There was, and it was during the recent storms. There was a vendor in Tulsa that we received complaints on. We filed on him. He ultimately pled guilty and paid a hefty fine and is on supervision. We don't have, in the absence of a declared emergency, an anti-gouging statute, the free market rules. People can charge whatever they want to for goods and services, and you meet that by going to the guy next door if he charges too much. But in an emergency declared by the governor or the president, we put a cap on how much prices can be raised, and going above that is a crime in Oklahoma.
You and Linda are co-chairing the Legal Services Fund Drive here in 2008. We have a couple of minutes left. Tell us more about that.
Well, that is a very happy chore. Legal Services does a wonderful job for people of low income who need access to legal services. And that's particularly important to me because I've been active in domestic violence. And oftentimes in a domestic violence situation, a person will need to go to legal services to get a protective order or to get a divorce filed. And if it weren't for legal services, then they would be begging those services from attorneys who end up doing it pro bono. This is an annual fund drive. Last year it was chaired by Burns Hargis and Mike Turpin, and this year it's chaired by Linda Edmondson and Drew Edmondson. And we're appealing to law firms and corporate Oklahoma to step up and help us make sure that people get the legal services they need.
And how will the money be spent specifically?
The money is spent directly on services. There are regional offices around the state of Oklahoma that provide legal services to people in need. And you know, I've looked at the books. It's being spent very wisely, very small percent on administration. Most of it's directly to services.
Helps the people that need it and cannot do it.
That's correct.
On their own.
Otherwise, the doors of the courthouse are locked to them.
Access to justice.
Well, Drew, we appreciate you coming on The Verdict for your 8th time and want to make sure you take your coffee cup with you this time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it and I hope to come back.
All right. Drew
You're
Edmondson
always welcome.
is the State Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma. We'll be back with the final word right after this. You're watching The Verdict.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
When you hear someone's been on 8 times, you think, man, they just must be on every other week. But we've done 367 shows, so 8 times.
7 years, yes.
Yeah, he's barely once a year, but always a great guest.
Always, and he does so much. He is a unique Attorney General. Oklahoma is very blessed to have someone like Drew Edmondson serving in that position because he has not he started out as a prosecutor in Muskogee County as a district attorney. And just this year, he's back in court, and he has not lost his litigation skills at all. He's always been a good trial lawyer and a good jury trial lawyer as well. And he is very active. He can operate in any circles, no matter how local or how national or international, and represent the state of Oklahoma well.
And it'll be interesting to see how that poultry litigation case turns out.
It's a huge case, and I was really pleasantly surprised, without trying to pick sides, one way or the other. I was pleasantly surprised he participated.
Let's take a look at some websites where you can get more information. First, on Drew Edmondson's office. You can reach Drew's office by going on the web and typing in www.oag.state.ok.us. That's .oag.state.ok.us. And you can also go to our website and tell us about a guest you'd like to visit with or about a topic you'd like to see us discuss. And that website is theverdict.tv, theverdict.tv. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Our thanks to our special guest, Attorney General Drew Edmondson. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We will see you next week with another show right here on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.